Let me tell you about Mykola, a guy who went from teaching the Pythagorean theorem to proving that the shortest distance between 2 points is indeed a bullet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Our story kicks off in a picturesque Ukrainian village, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, the air is fresh, and the biggest drama is whether Mrs. Petrov's goat ate Mr. Ivanov's cabbages again. Here we meet Mykola, a mathematics teacher with a heart of gold and apparently the patience of a saint, which he would definitely need given what life had in store for him. Mykola lived in a cozy little house with his wife, Nastya, an artist who carved beautiful wooden sculptures. While Mykola spent his days explaining why x was always hiding in algebra equations, Nastya transformed chunks of wood into art. They were living the dream, simple, peaceful, and blissfully unaware that their lives were about to become a nightmare. Every day, Mykola would cycle to the local school where he taught mathematics to children. He was beloved by all his students. Well, almost all. There was one notable exception, a rich kid named Avin, who apparently missed the memo about respecting teachers. Avin was your classic spoiled brat, the kind of kid who thought his daddy's money made him invincible. He spent his days making fun of Mykola's modest clothes and appearance, desperately trying to provoke his teacher into losing his temper. You see, Avin had a plan worthy of a cartoon villain. If he could just push Mykola far enough to hit him, he'd get the teacher fired. But here's the thing about Mykola, the man had the emotional regulation of a Buddhist monk. Insults bounced off him like rubber balls. Nothing Avin said could crack his calm demeanor. In retrospect, this should have been everyone's first clue that Mykola possessed superhuman levels of self-control. Foreshadowing, anyone? Now, Mykola and Nastya were so off the grid that they didn't even own a television. No TV meant no news, which meant they were living in their own peaceful bubble while the world outside was about to pop it rather violently. One ordinary day at school, Mykola overheard something on the school's television that shattered his peaceful existence. Russia had invaded Ukraine. Soldiers were dying, territories were being captured, and suddenly math problems seemed incredibly trivial. But wait, there was good news too. That evening, Nastya told Mykola she was pregnant. He was going to be a father. They celebrated together, hope and happiness filling their small home. For one beautiful night, the war seemed like a distant problem. The next morning, Mykola kissed his wife goodbye and pedaled off to school on his bicycle, probably thinking about baby names and wondering if his child would inherit his love of mathematics. On his way, he spotted 2 soldiers smoking cigarettes, wearing uniforms he didn't recognize. Ha, thought Mykola, the government must have changed the uniform design. Bold choice, but okay. Spoiler alert, it was not a bold-fashioned choice by the Ukrainian government. When Mykola reached the school, it was completely empty. Not a single student. Not even Avin, which should have been his second clue that something was terribly wrong. The television at school spelled it out clearly. Russian soldiers had invaded and were already inside Ukraine. Those soldiers he'd seen weren't Ukrainian troops with new uniforms, they were Russian invaders. Mykola's heart dropped into his stomach. Nastya was alone at home. Those soldiers were near his house. He jumped on his bicycle and pedaled like his life depended on it, because his wife's life literally did. Tragically, Mykola arrived too late. The scene that greeted him was every person's worst nightmare. The 2 Russian soldiers were viciously beating his pregnant wife. Mykola tried to intervene, tried to be the hero, but 2 trained soldiers versus 1 math teacher. The odds weren't in his favor, and unlike Avin, these guys didn't need provocation to get violent. Please, Mykola begged, my wife is pregnant. The soldiers didn't care. They beat him too, then ransacked his house looking for valuables. Finding nothing worth stealing, one of them decided to do what all great villains do when they're disappointed, set everything on fire. Because if you can't have it, nobody can, right? Seeing her home burning, Nastya's grief and rage overpowered her survival instincts. She grabbed a stone and attacked the soldiers. It was brave, it was futile, and it was fatal. One of the soldiers shot her dead on the spot. In that moment, Mykola's entire world collapsed. The woman he loved, their unborn child, their home, their future, everything gone in an instant. He held Nastya's body and wept, the kind of soul-crushing grief that changes a person fundamentally and irreversibly. A few hours later, 2 Ukrainian soldiers arrived at the scene. Seeing the devastation, they felt genuine sympathy for Mykola. They helped him dig a grave for Nastya, supporting him through the unbearable task of burying his wife with his own hands. Mykola was no longer the cheerful math teacher who patiently explained equations to disinterested teenagers. That man died with his wife. What remained was someone filled with a singular purpose, revenge. The fire that had consumed his house now burned inside him, and it demanded payment in blood. "Take me with you," Mykola told the soldiers. "I want to join the Ukrainian army." The soldiers agreed and drove him to their military base. Before leaving, Mykola grabbed one of Nastia's wooden sculptures, a small protective talisman she had carved for him. It was all he had left of her. At the base, the senior officer took one look at this skinny math teacher and immediately suspected he was a Russian spy. Can you blame him? Mykola didn't exactly scream elite warrior. But after hearing the full story, the murdered wife, the killed unborn child, the burned home, the officer was moved. He agreed to let Mykola enlist. Here's the thing about going from teaching derivatives to disassembling rifles, there's a bit of a learning curve. Mykola struggled through basic training like a fish trying to climb a tree. While other soldiers assembled their weapons with practiced ease, Mykola fumbled with his rifle parts like he was solving a particularly difficult Rubik's Cube. The officer watched this performance and thought, this guy will never make a decent soldier. But Mykola had something the others didn't, motivation forged in tragedy and the stubbornness of someone who had nothing left to lose. While other soldiers slept, Mykola practiced. And practiced. And practiced some more. One night, Mykola asked his commanding officer to call him Raven instead of his real name. The other soldiers burst out laughing. The senior officer explained that code names weren't given, they were earned through exceptional service. Nicknames don't grow on trees, buddy. Mykola took the rejection in stride and doubled down on his training, which brings us to the plot twist nobody saw coming. When the army announced they needed more snipers to fight the Russians, several soldiers volunteered. Mykola raised his hand too. This prompted another round of laughter because, let's be real, the guy who could barely assemble a rifle wanting to become a precision shooter. Comedy gold. The senior officer was skeptical. You can't even put together a rifle properly. What makes you think you can be a sniper? Give me a chance, Mykola insisted. Just one chance to prove myself. The officer decided to humor him with an impossible challenge, assemble a rifle in 20 seconds. Most trained soldiers needed longer. What happened next shocked everyone. Mykola blindfolded himself, disassembled the rifle completely, then reassembled it perfectly, in just 18 seconds. Silence. Then applause. Turns out, spending years teaching geometry and spatial reasoning gives you mad hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness. Who knew math could be useful for something besides calculating discounts at the grocery store? The senior officer, sufficiently impressed, admitted Mykola into sniper training. However, there was a catch. While other trainees received modern rifles, Mykola got stuck with an old, beat-up weapon. The officer's logic was simple: prove yourself worthy first, then we'll talk about equipment upgrades. Sniper training made regular boot camp look like a vacation. The first lesson was about maintaining position no matter what. The instructor would fire shots near the trainees, and anyone who flinched or moved was immediately dismissed. When Mykola's turn came, he remained absolutely still, keeping his aim steady despite bullets whizzing past. All those years staying calm while Avon insulted him? Excellent preparation. The next test involved memorizing target locations, then shooting while blindfolded. Several soldiers passed. Mykola failed, not because he lacked skill, but because his ancient rifle's aim was off. Everyone knew that with a proper weapon, he would have succeeded easily. Then came the hardest challenge, shooting targets at night using only the brief illumination from flares. The senior officer fired a flare, and every trainee took their shots. Everyone missed. Everyone except Mykola, who held his fire. See, while everyone else was shooting blindly, Mykola was thinking. He realized direct aiming during flare light was impossible. So when the next flare went up, instead of shooting immediately, he used the brief illumination to calculate the exact distance to his target. Then, using mathematical formulas and trajectory calculations, he fired a perfect shot. Bullseye. The officer and soldiers stared in amazement. Nobody had ever passed this test before. The senior officer walked over to Mykola, saluted him with genuine respect, and said, "From now on, your code name is Raven." Mykola had earned his wings. After weeks of intensive training, Mykola graduated and received his first mission assignment. Russian soldiers had captured a checkpoint, and his team was sent to neutralize them. They reached the location and set up their positions. Just as they were about to engage, a civilian vehicle approached the checkpoint. The colonel ordered everyone to hold fire. They watched as Russian soldiers stopped the car, checked passports, searched the vehicle, then beat the civilians brutally before letting them leave, but keeping their documents. "Fire," the colonel commanded. In perfect synchronization, the snipers eliminated their targets. Mission accomplished. Clean, efficient, professional. Back at base, Mikola noticed several of his comrades were missing. When he asked about them, he learned they'd been sent on a different mission, and had been killed by a Russian sniper named Siri, reportedly the best marksman Russia had. This name, Siri, would haunt Mikola for the rest of his journey. The next mission brought an unexpected emotional complication. After laying mines and taking positions, Russian soldiers appeared in their sights. Among them was Avon, yes, that Avon, the annoying rich kid from school who used to torment Mikola. Somehow, the brat had joined the Russian army. When the colonel gave the order to fire, Mikola hesitated. Despite everything, Avon had been his student. But reality crashed in. This wasn't a classroom anymore. Pushing aside his emotions, Mikola shot at the nearby landmines instead. The resulting explosion killed all the Russian soldiers, including Avon. The colonel confronted Mikola afterward. "What were you thinking? One of them was my student. I didn't want to kill him." The colonel's response was harsh but necessary. "He stopped being your student when he joined the enemy. He made his choice." This interaction revealed something important about war. It doesn't care about your past relationships or emotional attachments. Mikola was learning this lesson the hard way. Despite his stern exterior, the colonel grew fond of Mikola. One day, he showed him a family photograph, his wife and 2 daughters. "They don't know I'm a soldier," the colonel confided. "My daughters think I run a business. Even my wife hasn't told them the truth." In return, Mikola shared his own tragic story, becoming emotional as he recounted how Russian soldiers murdered his pregnant wife. The colonel comforted him, and a genuine friendship formed between these 2 men bonded by war. This moment of human connection would make what came next even more devastating. Their next mission targeted a group of Russian soldiers passing through a specific route. Mikola and the colonel reached the location and established their positions. After waiting, they spotted 2 Russian soldiers waiting for reinforcements. Then Mikola saw him, the soldier who had murdered his wife. The man was right there, directly in his crosshairs. Every fiber of Mikola's being screamed for vengeance. This was the moment he'd been waiting for since joining the army. Permission to fire, Mikola requested urgently. "Denied," the colonel replied. "But..." "I said denied." Mikola's rage overwhelmed his discipline. He fired anyway. The soldier dropped dead, but so did Mikola's advantage. The Russians now knew their position. Worse yet, the infamous Siri was nearby and had just been alerted to their presence. "What have you done?" the colonel shouted. Before Mikola could respond, Siri fired a single shot. The colonel's head snapped back, and he fell dead instantly. Horror and guilt crashed over Mikola like a tidal wave. His impulsive decision, his inability to follow orders, had cost the colonel his life. A good man with a family who would never know how their husband and father died was gone because Mikola couldn't control his emotions. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Russian soldiers began heavy bombardment on their position. Mikola realized retreat was the only option. He grabbed the colonel's body and fought his way back to base, carrying both the corpse and the crushing weight of responsibility for his death. Back at base, Mikola was devastated. He blamed himself completely for the colonel's death and vowed to kill Siri, not just for revenge, but as penance. Soon after, intelligence located 2 Russian snipers. Mikola deployed immediately, determined to prove himself. He successfully eliminated the first sniper, but the second one managed to shoot him in the arm before Mikola killed him too. Injured but alive, Mikola retreated to a secret location to recover. During his recovery, the army major called with news. They'd identified the sniper who killed the colonel. It was confirmed to be Siri. Once healed, Mikola returned to base for a full briefing on their target. The major painted a terrifying picture. Siri was Russia's elite sniper with a perfect kill record. He had eliminated 6 of Ukraine's best marksmen. He recorded his kills and posted them online to demoralize Ukrainian forces. His trademark was never changing positions. He would set up once and hunt everyone from a single location. The plan was straightforward but risky. 2 teams would attack. The first team would engage Russian soldiers from the front as a distraction. While the Russians were occupied, the second team would strike from behind. During this chaos, Mikola would infiltrate Siri's building and eliminate him. They reached the location and executed the plan. While snipers took their positions, Mikola stealthily entered the building. He encountered 2 Russian soldiers and eliminated them quickly and quietly. Then he signaled his team. On cue, Ukrainian snipers opened fire, killing Russian soldiers and creating exactly the distraction they needed. Inside the building, Siri noticed his men had stopped reporting. Something was wrong. He went to the roof where another Russian sniper was stationed, only to find the man already dead. Panic set in as Siri realized Ukrainian forces had surrounded him. He radioed for backup. 10 minutes, they told him. 10 minutes might as well be an eternity in combat. Siri rushed back to his position, scanning desperately for enemies. Then he noticed something out of place, a small wooden statue on the table in front of him. Before he could process what it meant, Mykola attacked from behind, stabbing him repeatedly. The statue was Nastia's protective talisman. Mykola had placed it there deliberately. His wife's final gift had marked Siri's death. The commotion alerted another sniper in the building. Before the man could react, Mykola threw a grenade, eliminating the threat. Minutes later, the backup Siri had called arrived at the building, unaware their best sniper was already dead. When they tried to radio Siri, Mykola answered the call. "You're all going to die," he promised. Then he shot the truck driver. Chaos erupted as Russian soldiers scrambled out, only to run directly into the crosshairs of waiting Ukrainian snipers. It was a massacre. The Russians were cut down methodically, their rescue mission becoming their funeral. Days after this successful mission, Mykola visited his wife's grave. He knelt beside it and spoke to Nastia, telling her that he'd fulfilled his promise. Every person responsible for her death, for their child's death, for destroying their life together, all were dead. The colonel's death had been avenged as well. But Mykola also made a new vow. He swore to continue serving Ukraine until his last breath, to protect others from experiencing the same tragedy that had shattered his life. The math teacher who once hated violence had become a weapon himself, forged in the fires of loss and tempered by war. As Mykola stood and walked away from the grave, he was no longer just a man seeking revenge. He had become something more, a guardian, a protector, and yes, a deadly sniper who could hit targets kilometers away, even blindfolded. Sometimes life gives us multiple choice questions, but fate circles an answer we never saw coming.